Okay, so Kyle is here, and we have a forum. So, shall we wait for you? Okay. I'll tell her. She's following.
So we can get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Announcements, we have Amy, who's our new counsel, yay. So she'll be here with us. We are waiting for BJ to arrive, but we will get going. We have quorum. And so call to order. Approval of minutes from July 31st, 2013. Need a motion?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion approved. Approval of addendum or supplemental agenda, we don't have one. So we can move on to statements from the public on agenda items. I have one speaker. Sharon, is this the...
That's the only
That's the
one.
only one, okay. So Tim Rees, subject matters, effort to procure waste to energy, sort station percentages, and composting. He's representing
Tim, would
himself.
you come up by the mic here?
So that we can hear you.
We're going to make you walk all the way up. Yeah, works.
Good morning.
Good morning. Do I need to have this real close, or can you just speak like
Set it
that?
down.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to provide input on this. I'm always a little concerned. I thank the people that have come here. This is such an important issue, the 3 items I signed up for in this community, that, one, I thank you guys for digging into it. We need help. We need help from the best engineers we can find. Now everyone's starting to talk about, waste to energy, smaller tonnage, but so far it's a lot of talk. We haven't really seen anything solid yet that would really work in our community. So it's really got to be researched well before we really go launching ourselves down that way. I guess I'm speaking on the waste to energy procurement one first there. I started on that. I'm a little bit surprised to see that it's listed in here as efforts to procure. What I've been hearing is there was efforts for request for information, which I think that's where we need to be right now. There's really no need to panic on the issue, but like I said, need for good research and good science. Helco's recently hired supposed to be one of the best experts in waste to energy. And the other day, months back there was a meeting here and I was begging the guy, help us at the county. The mayor says one thing, department head says another, where we're going and what our timelines are. It's just crucial. And as a learning tool, if you look back at the proposal I fought years back, and many people did, it would have been a disaster for our county. We never would have met the tonnages. We would have been relying on wood chips from Huhonua or out Hamakua side. Anybody would have been selling those to us to burn. And there was no way we would come close to matching the throughput required to even make a cent on it. And the way they set up the payback on the electricity was a disaster. It was a disaster for the people of the community. We were paying everything to build the facility, paying the guys to run it, and they were making all the money. It was a horrible deal. To be honest, I know Bill Takaba, I know he's an honorable, respectable man, and I cannot believe that he was involved in promoting that past contract. So it's a learning tool now. You can look at what our throughput is at this day, and imagine we had that facility up and running. Look back at the months and see when it would even begin to start to turn any profit or break even. So there's a great lesson to be learned in the documents you already have in this county. I'm very concerned about the technology, and I'm concerned, it's almost like UFOs. A lot of people believe in them, but where's the proof? Where's the one that crashed and you really have hard evidence? So this is how this waste to energy is turning out so far. It is a viable alternative, but where's the proof that someone with our parameters and our amount of material, it's working for, and it's working successfully. So I think we're going to have to go some form of waste to energy, even if it's not cost effective. I just think we need to reduce, I'm in favor of recycling and all that, but certainly reduction through some form of burning, it's kind of like a first step, while you're doing the other items. And hopefully the technology will increase in the near future. So I'm a big fan of what I keep using the term modular adaptability. What that is let's not throw all our eggs in one basket. Let's make sure any facility that is built is adaptable for the future. That actual facilities could be moved easily, they could be completely changed out. That's a design feature that really should be, other than an actual plant, you're not going to move that necessarily unless these are small facilities that are going to be island-wide. Reading through your document here, I see the first thing about the problem of trucking waste from West Hawaii to East Hawaii. So it sounds to me that somebody has made a decision, but that's funny, I follow the council. I didn't hear any decision by anybody saying we're going to have waste energy in East Hawaii. I haven't heard the mayor come out and say it. I haven't heard Bobby Jean come out and say it, and I haven't heard this commission say that it's going to be in East Hawaii. To me, that sounds foolish to begin with. It's, do you go to the larger throughput, which is the major problem currently with a successful waste energy facility? So it would make sense to build it in West Hawaii just on the amount of tonnage that goes to the landfills and combine East Hawaii's with it to try to make it viable. If you're talking about a clean type of factory, then there shouldn't be a problem with locating it in West Hawaii. It also can be almost invisible in Honolulu area, and there's room to do the facility there. Also, I think, now I'm going to move into the composting side of this, I think it would also be advantageous to truck the material at this time, and I call this the regulatory period. Whatever this body comes up with, and the council comes up with, the mayor comes up with, and implements. There's going to be a regulatory period. Right now, this day, we could be saving, I think it was 165,000, or maybe that's not the daily savings, if you merely took the material that goes into a landfill in East Hawaii and put it in Honolulu. If, when the regulatory period is over, you build a waste-to-energy plant in West Hawaii, you could use that material. It's not locked and gone once it's buried in the landfill. It can be mined. I've checked this with EPA and State Department of Health. They have no objections to the mining of Honolulu, the idea of that at this time. In Hilo, it won't happen because of the rock fill and because there's no guarantee of what material has gone in there. They can't begin to guarantee operator safety on any kind of process like that. Honolulu, it's a whole other story. So in relation to the composting, it would make sense also. I'm not talking about trucking green waste. We have a great thing going on with green waste in East Hawaii. I assume West Hawaii is a very successful project also. With regards to composting, it has to be cost effective. If you take the material that is in the compactors trailers right now, you run it West Hawaii, you could have your MERF facility over there, one location, great efficiencies to be gained by that. Again, almost invisible to the community, those operations, jobs created in West Hawaii. They're not the greatest jobs in the world, but they're jobs. You know, nowadays plenty of people are willing to do things that they wouldn't be 15 years ago or what they were schooled for. So, you know, you can't discount the addition of jobs into a community. And the efficiencies that would be gained from having a MERF in West Hawaii. For recycling, not just for composting, but for recycling also, where they would be taking off whatever is priority. If plastic's making money and it turns out to be the greatest thing to focus on, the MERF is built primarily for plastics, but it also can be used to divert compostables. So it's pretty easy to adapt those facilities. If you guys haven't ever toured Sean Pahio's facility here in Keau, please do. Please look at what minor investment in machinery improvements brings in the way of efficiency. He's got the smallest little MERFs, but if you look at how it operates, how it improves functioning, it's amazing. And when I see the council members that are in favor of composting talk, they speak as if it's almost like at any cost. Well, I'm not that much an advocate. I'm a farmer. Certain farmers do need this compost and will purchase it, but there's a big unknown. Like I said, with the greater percentage of material that will become compost if you go that route, we have a very good thing going right now. By the way, I spoke with one of the entomologists who works for State DOA. He has a different take on the little red fire ant and the processing we're currently doing. He says he believes the processing is killing that ant off or somehow keeping it from being spread through the green waste mulch pile already. And I think through history that's borne out right now. A great operation, nobody's finding the red ant and the material going out. Guaranteed there must be some coming into there. So we don't know yet. I want to see some science on that. What is working? We're not just lucky. It doesn't work that much to our favor all the time. But the biggest selling point for the composting on the council that I've heard is They're saying it'll stop the spread of invasive species. And I'm glad that you got this diagram here. Look at this pamphlet with showing some of the composting operations. Nothing is guaranteed, so I don't want people having a false security. If you're selling compost bulk and there are red ants in the area, there's many opportunities for them to get back into the material. Guaranteed they're killed off for a 2 or 3 day period on the cook cycle, yeah? So I don't discount that composting generally is a safer method and it will get rid of some of the invasive species. Point is, we're not having that bad of a problem right now with our green waste processing. And I'm speaking only for East Hawaii. I don't know anything about West Hawaii, how effective that program is over there. So cost is crucial on composting. The other thing, now I'll speak about sortation station recycling
I think
numbers.
we have
Okay.
presentations coming up that I think you'll find very interesting, so.
Okay, sort station, some of the problems with it. It's not a sort station, it's a big box. It's a big concrete floored ag building is really what it is. Commercial warehouse. And what we're doing is we're using the wrong equipment to try to do something that should be in a small MERF facility or a MERF facility tuned for what you're after. Like I said, are you after plastics primarily? Are you after glass? Are you after compostables? Well, one thing that I'm very concerned about is when you're talking about the tons coming off the floor, 2 things I'm concerned about. One is the cost of our current program up there because they don't have the proper equipment. I've worked construction all my life. Go up there, watch what they're doing. It's incredibly inefficient, yet the guys are doing a good job with what task they have been given and the equipment. But it's almost silly. You know, they're doing stuff that needs almost hand picking, and yet you've got them in equipment, you know, moving hydraulically, trying to do what human hand needs to do off a conveyor belt. So you got to go to a MERF facility somewhere. I advocate one location, West Hawaii, for the efficiencies to be garnered from that. But if you're going to keep sorting in East Hawaii, for God's sakes, there needs to be some kind of MERF system set up. Now, 2, the overtime hours going on down there. Currently, we're not getting the true picture. I got this from a union representative. He says, you know what? No one's looking at the overtime hours on this sorting program. So cost of what we're doing versus how much are we pulling out. And I'll guarantee you with the equipment, what they're getting mostly is dirty cardboard, mixed recyclables, things that are, again, handled better through a MERF facility or through greater public participation of pre-sort. Yeah, and you folks know we got to go more towards that area, whether it's, folks have suggested the idea, something like San Luis Obispo has. You know, you get paid for everything. Now you got the homeless people in the whole community participating. They're some of the best recyclers. You have church groups wanting to get money for causes. Great recycling groups that get very active into it. But they get paid for everything, cardboard and all. Nothing is just, you know, you do the work, you get the money. You keep it out of the landfill, you get a small amount of money for what you're doing, but these sites are set up in grocery store parking lots in the back corner of a parking lot. They work incredibly well. They use nothing more than shipping containers and a small scale and plastic bins and tubs, trash cans. So we need to get going that way. If you're going to promote pre-sort, you got to do that cost effectively also, because that is the most efficient way to really keep this stuff out of the landfill. I lost my train of thought on that, but what I was really concerned about is the quality of the product. Don't assume that just because it comes off the East Hawaii sort station floor, that is high quality compostable material. Yes, it may be compostable, a large component of that stuff, but it's stuff that would almost be better bundled up and shipped to Washington. Plastics, dirty cardboard. Pardon?
A few more seconds if you could wrap.
Okay, and paper. So, yeah, you can burn it in waste energy, you can compost the stuff. Will it be adding nutrition to the green waste mulch that we have? Is it worth the cost to get a small benefit in, you know, a farm amendment, you know, that farmers will use? So I'm really concerned about how it's a big balancing act. It's not easy for anybody to do. Appreciate you guys looking into it. Thanks.
Thank you for your presentation and your concerns. Reports and correspondence. Good morning, BJ. Thank you.
Morning.
Director's report.
Well, you have the director's report that we've handed out to you, and I really don't have much to add to it, but what we had promised at the last meeting was that because we have the resolution from the county council, and there was some interest in what Maui had done, Part of my director's report is, rather than me trying to give you an overview of what Maui County did, we're very fortunate today to have Kyle Ginoza, who is the director of Maui's Department of Environmental Management, who lived through the RFI and RFP process. And Kyle graciously agreed to come today and do a brief presentation, kind of an overview of what they went through, and then he is available for you to ask some questions about what Maui did. And I thought that that was a whole lot better than me trying to give you an overview of what Maui did, is to actually have Maui County represented. So I'd like to introduce Kyle Ginoza.
Good morning, Kyle.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm Kyle Ginoza. I'm the Maui County Director of Environmental Management. I've been in this position for just over 2.5 years, and when I came on 2.5 years ago, the landscape of solid waste management in Maui County had been really a medley of recyclable programs throughout the county. So we had your community drop boxes where residents would source separate cardboard, newspaper, plastic, glass, etc. And we were toying with the idea of doing a residential curbside recycling program. And so we had an integrated solid waste management plan that was developed in 2009, which really tried to look at strategies to increase diversion. Currently we're at about 40% diversion rate, and our goal was 60+% diversion rate. And so when I came in, I wanted to kind of relook at the spectrum of what we could do and what would be the best bang for the buck. And so one thing we explored was waste to energy or waste conversion or whatever. I mean, there's a number of names for it. And in March of last year, so March of 2012, after doing quite a bit of research on our end, we issued what we call an RFQ, request for qualification. It's also really RFI, request for information. I just thought RFQ sounded a little bit better to the outside than RFI. So it was the same thing, just termed differently. And really what I was looking for was to see if there would be interest in the parameters we have on Maui, and specifically how I wanted the project to be financed and how I wanted it structured. And so as a result of the RFI, we had 100-something inquiries about it, and really a lot of them ended up not submitting a RFI response because I told them that by submitting it doesn't mean that we're going to shortlist from there. And so they didn't want to share their information necessarily. But what I did find out of the RFI process was that there was considerable interest in what we had on Maui, and that why not kind of consider going through an RFP. And so that's really what we use the RFI or RFQ process for, is to just make sure that there was enough interest for us to devote resources to an RFP process. And kind of in the middle of the RFI to the RFP, we've been having discussions with our utility about power, because typically the primary output is some kind of electricity generation. And so in order to have a project, you need to have this relationship with the utility to accept that power. And specifically with projects like these, they would prefer to be recognized as firm baseload power, meaning that like your renewables are dispatchable. When they need it, they'll take it. When they don't need it, they'll curtail you. And because of the financing component of the project, it can't be so up in the air like that we're not recognized as baseload or some firm commitment. And what's happened in the landscape of renewable energy on Maui is we have quite a bit of PV power, we have quite a bit of wind power. So wind, we have on the order of 73.2 megawatts of wind. which is a lot. And then, I don't know, it's like 40 or so megawatts of PV. And if you look at the daytime demand, it's on the order of 100, 180 megawatts. So there is some room to play with, the 70 plus the 30 or 40, there's still some room to play with. But the overnight demand drops to on the order of about 80 megawatts. So you can imagine if the demand is only 80, we already have 73.2 megawatts of potential wind. I mean, there's not much room to insert a waste to energy project capacity as baseload, as 24/7 selling to the utility. So in light of the situation we had on Maui, where we likely would not be recognized as baseload power unless we really kind of force the issue with the Public Utilities Commission and really, wouldn't work so collaboratively with the utility and others, we decided to kind of change direction a little and say, okay, maybe electricity is not necessarily the best output from our project. And so I researched further Europe's model. And what Europe does that's different from the mainland US is a lot of places have a two-stage process as far as waste conversion or waste to energy, whereby the first stage is taking in the trash, sorting out whatever residual recyclables are in the trash, and then processing that trash to create what is called RDF, refuse derived fuel. And so that RDF, they can make into different grades for, depending on what level of combustibility the downstream client wants. But that first stage creates almost a commodity fuel that then power generation resources currently existing throughout the landscape can then buy that RDF as a fuel for their business to create electricity. So it's a two-stage process of creating this refuse-derived fuel, and then from there utilizing existing power generation resources to utilize that fuel. So the opportunity to use a fuel is expanded because there are different users. And so if you look at like someplace like H-Power in Honolulu, their first two boilers were RDF boilers. So they shred up, they pre-process the trash, dry and shred up the trash into refuse-derived fuel, and then burn the refuse-derived fuel in their boilers, and create electricity. So that was something that I thought would be best for the Maui community. So we left it kind of open-ended in our RFP to say, while we're not saying we wouldn't take a electric output scenario, in light of the condition that we cannot get baseload power in all likelihood, you need to show us how it's going to be viable in light of the major revenue source in the back end is so uncertain. And so, as you can imagine, we had a number of typical waste to energy providers saying, oh, we'll just force the utility to accept the power, and we'll just ram it down their throats. And then we had others that kind of took our suggestion of, we have these constraints, there are potential power generation resources currently either on island or throughout the state, and the RDF has a possibility of replacing existing imported fossil fuels such as coal or something that's already being imported and has a carbon footprint, and yet we can replace that with something that was generated on island. And so we got 25 respondents to our RFP, and we basically selected one. And the company we selected was one that is not a waste to energy per se developer, but one that will create RDF. So the way I kind of look at it is it's really a two-stage process of our process where, and I can get into the technologies later, but I felt like the technologies weren't mature enough for us to really feel confident to jump in at this point. I really feel like in the next 5 to 10 years that the technologies will mature, but I think for the most part, the common foundation for these technologies is they want this pre-processed input, or RDF, or some type of refuse-derived fuel, as that input to go into what I term a black box and output something where it's electricity or some kind of liquid fuel. And so why not try to start the landfill diversion step early by creating the RDF, and when we feel confident enough that we can convert the RDF to something usable on island, then we will then take the next step in that phase 2 of the project. And really that resulted from, when we investigated these technologies, I mean, you're looking at, if you have a chemistry background, you can kind of see, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense in theory, but at the end of the day, 99% of the people in this world would say, okay, it makes sense in theory, but would I, put my savings and vouch for it? I mean, it's really a black box. I mean, I have an engineering background and I understand, the schematic of it, but am I willing to invest, the community support in this, in something that I'm not necessarily all in for either? And so I felt like if we can do it where RDF, refuse-derived fuel, is sellable and can utilize existing power generation resources, it's something to realize 85+% landfill diversion, reduce the importation of fossil fuels, and really do phase 1 of what I consider a 2-stage process of really best utilizing the waste resource we have. And so in our RFP, what I did was, in order to make sure that people had, or developers had enough experience, I said that we needed 2 commercially operating facilities with 3 years each. And the reason why I said that was, I felt like if I'm a venture capitalist, I would start dumping money into one plant, hoping that, I can get these other plants online. But I don't think I would dump money into 2 plants over 3 years if it wasn't a viable technology. So that was kind of my low threshold. And it really weeded a lot of, from the 100-something inquiries before, a lot of them said, if you make this kind of requirement, we have it at a bench scale that, we want you to be the first project. And so that's kind of where, in large part, the industry is. That a lot of them want you either to be the first commercial project, or they have one kind of starting, and I didn't want our community to be that pioneering community. The way I kind of try to put it in layman's terms is, I kind of liken it to the stock market, where, would you invest all your money in a startup that does not have, the operating history, or how do you pick that startup that will be mature 5 years from now? So we tried to kind of pick the one that was somewhat advanced enough that they had some commercial experience, but not necessarily had to have 20 years of experience. So we didn't want to necessarily pick the Westinghouse that had decades of experience, but isn't necessarily the most cutting edge in the current day. But we wanted something that was commercially proven. And so that's kind of how we structured the RFP. And like I said, it really came down to pretty much 3 buckets of what we got through the RFP. Your pure incinerators that had, decades of experience. You had kind of gasification technologies that either barely met the qualifications or tried to say they met the qualifications. Or we had this scenario of creating a refuse-derived fuel and trying to sell it. And so, as I mentioned, we selected the RDF solution. The main issue with RDF is you need to find an offtake market. And that is the problem in the continental US and here, is can you convince a coal burning or some kind of existing facility to replace that fuel source with refuse-derived fuel? And that really is our biggest challenge right now. As we right now we're negotiating a contract with the developer, and in large part, that contract is dependent on them securing offtake agreements to sell the liquid and solid fuels. Because the way I structured the RFP is, because it's such an emerging technology, even if we have kind of a minimum qualification, I did not feel comfortable going to our county council saying, hey, can we float $120 million or $100 million in revenue bonds or some kind of municipal bonds on a project that has a history of sometimes not working. And so the way we structured it is that the developer would own and operate, so they would design, build, finance, own and operate the facility. And so it would be a parallel work kind of in parallel to our landfill. So in case the facility didn't work, we still had our landfill as a going concern and that could accept the waste. And the risk on the county at that point was we were providing vacant agricultural land and we'll help them get through the entitlement process. But if they go 3 years and the facility is half built and they want to walk away, we hadn't invested much other than my staff's time, but not had issued millions and millions of dollars of bonds. So that's kind of how we structured it, and that's why the RFI process worked out, because I wanted to see, would people be interested in this scenario of the county's not going to pay for it? And that's where a lot of places in the industry are going because of the kind of risk in the technology risk involved. So that's kind of in a nutshell the path we took. So in March of 2012, what year is this? Okay, so March of 2012, we did the RFI. We looked at the responses and then we went into developing the RFP. I was ready to issue it in the July timeframe, but in my latest meeting with the utility, it was going to be a crapshoot if we could get a baseload power contract. So I redid the RFP and issued it in November, having it due in January 31st. So January 31st of this year, we got the proposals and we awarded, I think, in March. And so since March, we've been kind of
1 year total for the 1 year?
Yeah.
1 year.
But I mean, I've been looking at it for the last 2.5 years. But I finally felt like after about a year, just over a year, that hey, I think it's something that you cannot disregard it, that I think it's ripe enough that we should at least look at it and see what we can get. And if it's nothing, then well, we wasted the time of developing the RFP. But we did it all in-house. Basically, I've traveled places and gotten people to talk to who have gone through it, and just, that's where we're at. We're at the contract negotiation stage. But for me, the main concern is getting that offtake contract for the solid fuel.
I have a question. Thank you very much for coming up with financing. You mentioned the phase 2 part of it, and you're hesitant to commit to any technologies in utilizing the RDF. You said you might touch on it a little bit more, but what are the leaders that you're looking at, leading technologies that you're looking at developing or being viable within the next few years to really utilize this resource that you're developing?
So kind of the spectrum that's more developed is more like gasification technologies. And gasification, as compared to incineration is just burn it, use the heat, to go to a boil, like a steam boiler, and then run a steam turbine, basically. So that's how you create electricity. Gasification is, in a controlled air environment, you take the temperature to high temperature, like say 2,000 degrees, and you break the matter into its elemental components. What you're really trying to harvest out is the hydrogen and carbon dioxide. And what they do is they refine that and create a synthetic gas, a syngas, that then becomes the fuel to burn. And because it's a syngas now versus just just trash or refuse, then it's supposedly a cleaner burn. the issues I've had with where the gasification and why I didn't want to really go for it from the get-go is a lot of the technology works on a homogeneous mix input. So like palm oil, or they have something that they know the composition of, and so they can tweak their technology to adequately adapt to whatever the input is. But now when you're talking about municipal solid waste, I mean, it could vary from day to day, hour to hour, from region to region. And so there's the risk of scalability risk, where it's easier to do it at a half ton to 1 ton per day system, but how do you get it to 150, 200 ton per day? So there's that risk, as well as the input risk. And so of the technologies, I think gasification is the furthest along. You have different gasification technologies like pyrolysis or like plasma arc. Plasma arc is just really high temperature, and you're separating into its elements to create the syngas. But it's something that, it's partly the technology risk, but partly because of, like I mentioned earlier, the risk with coming to agreement with the utility, that I'd say that over the next 5 or 10 years, we may see development on our island ramp up such that the demand for electricity will go up. And in which case, there would be that capacity that we might slide into. So I would say it was more a matter of there was no electricity, guaranteed electricity sale. Because as I mentioned before, I mean, initially I was thinking of, since they're funding it and they want to prove out their technology, why not? It's a matter of, we just kind of get this free project on land that we would otherwise maybe not develop. So I was thinking of just going with a gasification technology if the utility was able to buy it all. Just because it would result in significant, 80, 90% plus diversion. So that's kind of why we kind of deviated. But I think that that field is advancing, and I'm hoping that when our development picks up, that we get that capacity for baseload power, and as the technology advances, that it would be kind of this convergence where Maui would take the next step. And so just a little bit of background of what we selected. So we selected, like I said, one to create RDF. So we have waste streams of fats, oils, and grease, sewage sludge, green waste, and municipal solid waste. So the municipal solid waste will come in, we'll do a pre-sort, so kind of a dirty MERF, material recovery facility. And then from there, we'll do a organic and inorganic waste stream separation. So it'll be a press that will basically separate the organic and inorganic. The organic portion will be mixed with the sewage sludge and put into an anaerobic digester. And so that's where anaerobic digestion is. In the absence of air, this bacteria basically eat up the organic matter and emit methane. And so we'll take that methane and refine that to liquefied natural gas. So part of the waste stream will create a liquid fuel. As far as the inorganic component of the municipal solid waste would be shredded up and dried and mixed with dry green waste to create refuse-derived fuel, or RDF. And that RDF would then be a coal replacement, or could be marketed as a coal replacement. And so that's where we need to find that off-take market to take that. And as far as running the plant, what they call a parasitic load, that will be part of the fuel generated, but also we have landfill gas that we collect from our existing landfill, and currently we just burn it via flare, just so that it's not emitted to the environment. So instead of just flaring it off, we're going to put a generator and use that electricity generated to power the plant. So that's basically the fats, oils, and grease also would go in the anaerobic digester. So that's, I apologize, I didn't bring a schematic, but I can provide that to Bobby Jean. That you can see it's basically like a bifurcated process to create a solid fuel and a liquid fuel. Yes?
So where would the, what part would the vendor do and what part would the county do?
Okay, so the way we, that's an excellent question. The way we segregate it is, I wanted to control the scale house to our landfill and have the facility right, basically co-located with our landfill. So we purchased agricultural lands just Makai of our landfill for this purpose or any kind of future solid waste management purposes. And so the way the flow would be is, somebody would come to the landfill, they get scaled at our scale house, and then for municipal solid waste, we would send them to a facility. So like if our landfill is here, we have a parcel right next to it. So they would come to our parcel, and the vendor would control the facility on this separate parcel. So they would come to our scale house, we give them a scale ticket, they pay us, and then we would send them over to the vendor. And so we would pay the vendor based on a certain tonnage. And it's their responsibility to do whatever with the trash. And then it's their responsibility to sell the RDF, to sell the LNG, and so they get a tip fee from us, and they get those 2 extra revenue, or actually 3 extra revenue streams. The recyclable materials that they harvest out in the front end, the LNG and the RDF, as well as the tip fee. So those are the revenue sources to finance the project and to operate the project. And we would still continue to run our landfill, and any residual material from this facility, they would pay us to landfill it. So typically the residual material from this facility would be things that have no either organic or non-organic things and things that won't burn. So non-organic, non-combustible items. So stuff like if there's like a porcelain toilet that ends up being thrown away, you can light that all you want, it won't burn. And so they would want to give that back to us. Or, as part of their process, there might be a lot of dirt or rocks. So that has no value, so that would just come out and they give that to us. So really what they would give back to us are the inerts, the inert materials, as well as like, they don't want to deal with the hazardous waste. And we can make them deal with it, but it's expensive, so we prefer that they give those back to us.
What do you do with the hazardous waste?
So right now we don't have a household hazardous waste program, and at residential quantities we allow it at our landfill. Commercial ones, we have commercial, like 4 commercial providers that take the hazardous waste. So we're currently in the process of trying to figure out if we can get a more robust, or we could really get a household hazardous waste program. Like I know on this island on Kauai you have events where people can bring in. We don't even have that. And so we're looking at your processes and Kauai's processes to see if an event-based method would be better for us, or if we just be inundated with tubs and tubs of chemicals if we did it on an event basis. So we still need to figure that out. But really it's a very defined separation between their facility and our facility. And it's really a matter of, we weigh it, we collect from the hauler, and then we pay them a certain tip fee for what goes across to their facility.
So you guys are not going to be doing any kind of sorting or recyclables, reuse, kind of thing like cardboard? I mean, that all go away, or?
So currently we have, as I mentioned, the Dropbox program. And just for point of reference, it costs the county $303 a ton to basically get rid of it. And basically where it's sent is, the glass is sent to Oakland, and the plastics, newspaper, and cardboard are sent to either China or Vietnam. So none of it is used on island or in Hawaii. And so, the public has always been clamoring for, what about curbside recycling? So, like Honolulu has a 3-bin program: mixed recyclables, green waste, and your municipal solid waste. Well, what we found, we did a pilot program of about 1,600 homes. And what we found is that recycling does increase, but it does also come at a cost. So we looked at, if we were to roll out curbside recycling, the true cost would mean that we'd have to increase the solid waste bill about 37%. And people already complain about, we charge $18 a month or $216 a year for residential curbside pickup. And we already get a number of complaints at $216 a year. And we have twice a week pickup for a 96-gallon toter, basically, bin. And so, you know, I presented that to the county council that, you know, we could continue to go along this route as long as people are fully aware that there is a premium associated with that source separation. Well, actually, I mean, just separation, mixed separation at the source. Because from there, you know, we take it to a processing facility that then has to do a manual separation of that mixed recyclable material. And so what we're looking at this in our waste conversion program is that it would be just a single bin at the household. And once we went from the scale house to their facility, there would be a front-end material recovery facility.
That would be operated by the contractor?
Yeah, by the contractor. So it's part of that contract. Yeah.
Contract, yeah.
And so they'd have a manual sort, you know, it's basically a conveyor system. So they'll do a manual sort of just big stuff, and then they'd have an automated sort of, you know, for plastics, and they would separate out chlorinated plastics as well, because chlorinated plastics are not good to burn. There's more emissions than you'd want. So they have first a manual, kind of a big manual sort, or a rough manual sort, then a automated sort, and then the separation into organic, inorganic. So there will be that front-end separation. Of course, the naysayers of that kind of situation is that when you do it as a dirty MERF, is the commodity that's the result of this process clean enough that people would want it downstream? Because you can imagine, if you just throw a bottle in, you know, a blue bin here, and it doesn't touch trash, it's not as contaminated as if you pick it out from the trash line. But, you know, the industry has advanced enough that, you know, there is that market for what is pulled out of the dirty MERF. So that's what we're going with. So there is, so as a result, you know, we're gonna recycle a lot more than we do as far as your traditional recyclable materials, you know, cardboard, plastics, newspaper, and whatever. But we also will create a lot of landfill diversion, because the rest of the stuff that's not landfill, for one, we're going to pull out more recyclable materials, and then the next step of the inorganic and organic, we're going to utilize that. And only really the residuals from this process, like the inerts and such, would be landfill if it couldn't be otherwise recycled. And so actually I met with the developer yesterday before coming here, and I asked him to explore, you know, is there any way for you to reuse the inerts? You know, because it is something that, why do we put more dirt? You know, we harvest, you know, why not use dirt rather than just landfill dirt, or, you know, that kind of rocky material? So that's what we're exploring as well. But I guess worst case scenario would be we'll still just landfill the inert material.
What's the tipping fee that you pay?
So our current tipping fee that we charge is $75.60, I think. We just upped it, so it's $75.60, and they're charging us $68.
And when you mentioned, you know, the RDF could be a replacement for coal, is there coal currently being burned now?
On Maui, we have an operating sugar mill that basically they produce, I don't know, something like 10% of the power on island. And what they do is they need to produce power for the plantation, and they also have a power purchase agreement with the utility to provide the community with electricity. And what they burn is bagasse, the byproduct of the sugarcane process, and coal. So it's, depending on how wet the bagasse is, they have to put more coal if it's more moist, or, but it's a mix of coal and bagasse currently. And so one alternative, or one option for us, is to work with them and replace what they're, like displace some of the coal they're burning with some RDF.
Is there a large technology changeover required to be able to burn the refuse derived?
It's not in the burning that would create the main modification. It's the emission side of it, the scrubbing, the air scrubbing on the downstream side of it. So typically the RDF is not like one-to-one, that if you have, and what we're getting is a densified RDF. So after it's shredded and dried, it's kind of this fluffy material. But we're then taking it another process and densifying it. So it actually looks kind of like a Hershey's candy bar. So it's kind of like a briquette. And that's to be more like similar to coal. But the heating value is on the order of about 2/3 the heating value of coal per volume or per.
And would you be producing more than they could use?
No. So if they could take it, we could give it all to them. But it would require a modification of their air permit to make sure that they can put in the adequate emissions safeguards to meet the air permit. So that is what we're looking for commitment right now, is commitment from some provider that would take it as long as we can get the air permit approved, the modification approved. So say, Tom, I negotiate with you, hey, I have this RDF. Would you buy it and use it as a displacement for coal? I'll pay for the modification of your air permit, but if it gets approved, you are buying my RDF. That's kind of where we're at.
And probably they would save money because it'd be probably cheaper than buying the coal.
Yeah.
Or theoretically, hopefully.
It's pretty much, it's pretty comparable.
Oh.
But the big plus is it's a renewable energy source. So you get a lot of community bang for the buck, as well as, I think you get some tax breaks because you're increasing your renewable portfolio. So there are a lot of incentives to displacing or replacing the existing fossil fuel utilization. But yeah, it's not so much you need to do these major modifications to the boiler system. It's more make sure, whatever residual things are in the air, that you scrub that out.
And do you know what the residuals would be in the air?
As far as like what kind of compounds or what
That
kind
you
of...
have to use the scrubber, that you have to, the air permit would have to approve if you're changing the permit.
Because like for ours, we're taking out the chlorinated plastics.
Right.
That helps significantly.
Right. What would be left, do you know?
I don't know specifically, but from what I understand, it's in a lot of respects cleaner burning than the coal, but it also introduces, because it's refuse derived, you introduce other compounds that aren't necessarily in coal. And so that's kind of the challenge, is overall it's a good burn, but because you're introducing other things, you need to scrub for that.
So do you know of other communities that are creating RDF on the mainland or elsewhere?
So typically it's in Europe, and the reason why, in my estimation, it hasn't caught on in large part, waste to energy hasn't caught on. It's not as pervasive as a landfill diversion measure as you might expect in the continental U.S. is the electricity costs, or retail costs, are much cheaper than here. We pay like 40 cents per kilowatt hour. You go to like Topeka, Kansas, it might be 8 cents per kilowatt hour. And so they don't get the downstream revenue. And land is cheap, and you can find somewhere to build a new landfill. So the traditional barriers from landfilling of, you don't have land, and that you have in an island community or other places that are more progressive, you don't have in a lot of places in the U.S. So it's more a matter of if they don't have landfill space or they have some issue, that you see these incinerators or these waste to energy.
The other thing is that Europe collectively made a decision that they did not want new landfills constructed. So the European Union had really made this push. And so waste to energy, including the typical mass burn types of facilities that we had talked about with Wheelabrator, were routinely put together in Europe. And Europe is also, because they're basically older cultures, land space is a much higher premium. They have other difficulties because of the unique topography. So there was a real push in that direction. And so they've been really at much further down the road than the United States. In terms of landfills, in some places in the country, the tipping fees for landfills are like $25 to $40 a ton. And you're talking massive landfills that are just huge. And because of the, people truck trash from one state to another state to a landfill that services, and you even have some cross-country shipping between Canada and the US. And it's because land is cheap. And so when you're looking at an alternative to a landfill and you're having to look at what the cost of building a new facility for it, regardless of whether it's RDF or mass burn or gasification, the infrastructure costs are so high compared to just going with an existing landfill. And so that's been one of the major impediments in the United States in terms of moving towards new technologies. The other thing that Kyle mentioned, and this is the same problem that we saw the last time we went out, is you will have all kinds of people call you up, all kinds of people volunteer to come and do presentations, and they will paint a glowing picture of their technology and what they're able to do. And usually the first question you ask is, okay, sounds great. Where can I go and see your facility in operation? And what you want is a facility that is operating at a similar tonnage to what you want to dispose of. And you want to know that it's also dealing in municipal solid waste. So when somebody tells you, well, we have a 4-ton facility and we're gasifying corn cobs, or they've got a 1-ton facility and they're doing wood chips, you're going, well, wait, municipal solid waste is significantly different than corn cobs and wood chips. And ramping up from something that is doing 4 tons a day or a ton a day to something that you're looking at 200, in your case you have 450 tons a day in Maui. It's not, the technology changes a little bit in terms of the infrastructure you have to put in, and so you don't want, the decision we made the last time I was around, we didn't want to put our eggs in a basket that hadn't been proven. And we had asked, we didn't even ask for 2, we just asked for 1 facility anywhere in the world, and we asked that you be operating for 2 years. And almost all of the guys that had come and said, we've got this great technology, just dropped out because they didn't have a facility that you could go and look at that was dealing with municipal solid waste. Because you want to know that it's going to work on solid waste, not that it's going to work on corn cobs and wood chips and a homogeneous fuel stock. So, it's interesting because the same thing that Maui went through is very similar to the type of experience that we had when we went through an RFI to try and see whether we had interest, and then we went through an RFP. It's come a little bit further, and the interesting thing is, like, city and county, the first 2 boilers they have are RDF, but the 3rd boiler they went with was a mass burn incinerator, and part of that analysis is that it was cheaper to run the mass burn than it is to run the RDF. But I thought, this is nice because Maui actually got through an RFP, they've got something awarded. But you also have to put an asterisk next to that cost of $68 a ton. When they're bidding on the Maui contract, they're dealing with 450 tons. So the $68 a ton is not necessarily the same price quote that we would get for something similar here. I think the real question for us is we don't know. You know, until we go through the process and get people to respond to a proposal, we don't know what kind of a price we're talking about based on the amount of feedstock that we have. And one of the issues I think on this island is that currently you have a lot of people trying to propose renewables. Because everybody in the world's trying to use the timber that we have growing. And so you got Honolulu that was proposing to basically burn wood chips and convert from coal to wood chips. You have other guys proposing to basically produce a type of biofuel or from growing, you know, crops that you are growing specifically for that purpose, and then you sell the fuel to HELCO. We have HELCO facilities that currently have some exemptions from current EPA or the more modern EPA standards in terms of emissions controls. How long that lasts, we don't know, because the EPA seems to be tightening up on some of their enforcement, which may make HELCO take a second look at you know, what they're doing and what they have to do in terms of upgrading their own plants. But we also have a fairly large renewable portfolio because we've got geothermal, which is firm, and then we've got wind, and we have a growing number of solar farms, and then we also have a growing number of PV, both on commercial buildings as well as on residential buildings. And so I think, you know, as we go further down the road, we're going to have to do the same type of analysis that Maui did in terms of, you know, what's your capacity, what's your generation, what's your portfolio, what's the difference between your peak demand and your when it drops off later at night. And you know, if you need to have a power purchase agreement, do you do something else where you're basically coming up with a product that you sell to someone who has a separate agreement? You know, and you know, we're still kind of evaluating. I've been, it was very nice to be able to go and talk to Todd and look over the Maui experiences, because it's so recent, is what's really nice.
What is the current lifespan of your landfills? I mean, are you in the same situation as?
No, we actually are kind of unique for the island communities because we follow a coring operation that they mine for blue rock. And so as former sugarcane land is blasted for blue rock, for aggregate and other things, we then buy that land, line it, and fill it with trash. I mean, that's the current process. So, you know, we first start off in this one area, and because they blast, there's no nobody around, so there's no neighbors. And so, you know, they blast one area, then we buy that area from the landowner, and then they blast another area, then we buy that. So it's kind of nice where we don't have any foreseeable landfill capacity issue. So that was what was kind of unique about our procurement as well, is I fully was above board with everybody saying, hey, you know what, this is our situation with the landfill. So if you think we're just absolutely desperate to get a project, think again. So, you know, we are evaluating whether or not our current process is maybe better than engaging in a different direction. So that's, I mean, that alternative of the no project was viable for us. And I know that you guys have some landfill capacity constraints as well as in Kauai. And so I think that, I mean, in my opinion, it is, you know, worthwhile to pursue RFP and just see where the landscape is. Because for us, it was quite positive. as far as, what we got out of RFP. It was pretty much what we expected, that, the incineration, the big developers came in, the kind of more emerging people, and then okay, what are your conditions and how do we kind of adapt to your conditions? The other wrinkle I forgot to mention is, as we're trying to deal with the utility, because it's governed by the Public Utilities Commission, anytime they want to get power that's more than 1% of the capacity. So like in Maui County, Maui Electric has, I think, 290 megawatts of capacity. And so anything more than 2.9 megawatts, they have to go out for a competitive procurement for the power. And so what we were looking at was on the order of 10 to 12 megawatts if we get a gasifier or some kind of true waste-to-energy system. So we're looking at much beyond much higher than the 2.9 megawatts. And so they said, why don't you just wait, we're going to come out with a procurement, and you just bid into this procurement. It was for 50 megawatts. And so we were like, well, how, and this was like, I started talking to them in 2011, and they said, we can't wait for you, so if you don't get your act together, then too bad. So, I was trying to get our thing, going, but then we ran into some problems, but yet, last month, I think it was last month, they canceled their procurement. They basically, PUC said, we're closing this. If you want to do something, you got to start all over. And so that's the problem with kind of allying with the utility as well, is there is a process. There is a waiver process also that we're thinking of going through, that basically the PUC can grant a waiver from competitive bid. That in the public interest, they can say, County of Hawaii, we think that any project you do is for the community benefit, so we'll waive the procurement. But that just waives one step. You still have to negotiate a power purchase agreement, and depending on if they need the power or not, that's how much leverage they have or not. So that's the other wrinkle we kind of ran into.
I just wanted to know, when you do the blasting of the rock, about how long does that last? When you do a new area, what's the lifespan of that? Usually approximately.
What do you mean, the lifespan of the area that is
that
blasted?
that you start, before you have to move again.
It's probably 15 years, 15 or 20 years.
And then just...
Depends on how big of the area it is before they decide to move. So in this instance, where we're gonna buy next, it was like basically it was bordered by a road and a gulch, so they couldn't go anymore. So that's kind of the next area we'll buy.
Since you mentioned things that the utility's been forced to look at, PUC seems to be taking sort of stronger interest in the cable. That creates a whole other set of factors if you're looking at waste to energy, if there's inter-island competition. And I've spoken to someone who's trying to get international venture capital to come into the state, and they say, we're on the sidelines until there's a cable, and then we can cite something in the best location in the state. And if that were to happen, that would mean potentially that, your waste to energy plant in Maui would be competing with big geothermal, or, it's a completely different calculation.
In terms of cable, I cannot envision a cable from the Big Island. And the reason is that the need for energy is on Oahu. And, we're close to Maui, but we're very far away from Oahu, so, I just don't envision us taking energy here to get to Oahu, because Maui doesn't need our energy. And so it would have to be either Maui or somebody else going to Oahu, I think. But, Oahu's new boiler is 900 tons a day. And they're going to increase their electricity generation off of their mass burn facility to RFDs, RDFs rather. So, and those are considered renewables, so that helps with their portfolio there. But I just, I think that all this talk about a cable and geothermal going, if geothermal happens, it'll happen on Maui. Because, you know, that's because it's shorter from Maui to Oahu in terms of anything where you're looking beyond what your island needs. Because for our island, I don't think that we really need a lot more energy.
Well, it's kind of interesting.
Above what already is being put out.
What's interesting about H-Power too is they don't have a firm baseload power purchase agreement. What they do is they're dispatchable, meaning when Hilo wants the electricity, they sell it to them. And when they don't want it, they have a condenser that they just waste the heat from burning at H-Power. Because it's a diversion facility, basically. So they gotta keep burning. You cannot just turn off this kind of facility. But they cannot sell it 24 hours a day to Hilo.
That was an issue when we were trying to negotiate the last round, because we wanted a firm capacity, and we wanted to run 24/7 with the Wheelabrator proposal. And Helco wanted something that was dispatchable, and they wanted to be able to curtail, and we're going, it doesn't fit in to our projections in terms of when you're going to finance something, you need to know that you're going to have a certain amount of revenue, and you need a certain amount of predictability. And so it became one of the issues when we were going through negotiations. Because we had sat down with Helco several times during the last round. And those were some of the costs. And we were also at that time looking at going to PUC for a waiver. Because we felt that if we did do something that produced electricity, that was a renewable source, that helped us with our landfill issues, that there was public interest, and we felt pretty confident that under that scenario we could go in and get a waiver from the PUC, as well as getting a good price in terms of probably going for avoided cost as opposed to just cost of production.
And was pumped hydro considered as storage?
They hadn't been looking at that at all. They weren't looking at storage. They were basically looking at just going for capacity and having a set amount. And the biggest issues were storage capacity, because they needed to store at least maybe 5 to 7 days worth of rubbish, so that in the event something happened, we got shut down for a day, we didn't deliver, that they had the ability to continue feeding their boiler. But, you know, converting comes at a cost. So, Honolulu was going from coal to wood chips. And part of it was, you know, I think that the facility was sitting there for a while, so they, you know, probably had some things that if it had continuously been operated, that they might not have had to look at retrofitting. But the estimates that we were told was that it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $80 million to retrofit Honolulu. So it's a significant investment of capital for anybody that wants to do power generation. And I don't know, have they given you an estimate on what kind of capital investment they have to put into this? For the RDF and the anaerobic?
As far as the developer?
The developer.
I think it's on the order of like, I want to say like 80 million, 100 million, I don't know. Because the gasifier is typically on the order of like 50, 60 million just in that power generation component.
Well, I guess one of the advantages of you guys going to the refuse derived fuel is that if you don't really need it that day, or it can go up, you can just store it, right? I mean, it can be stored.
The shelf life isn't that long.
Oh, it's not? Oh, so you...
From what I understand.
Okay.
I don't know how long it is, but it's really a matter of you wanna do something with it. And so, you know, like I was mentioning, I don't know if I mentioned, but also on other islands, like on Oahu, they have either Sinikana Honolulu that has an RDF boiler, and then, you know, they have like AES is also feeds into the utility. They have a coal burning system as well.
Is AES also using some tires in their facility? Okay.
Where's the developer base?
The one we selected.
Yeah.
So their kind of worldwide headquarters is in somewhere in Canada. I want to say Ontario or Ottawa, someplace in Canada. My geography in Canada is not so great.
Energia is their name.
And it's Energia is ANAERGIA. ANAERGIA. So their U.S. headquarters is in Carlsbad by San Diego, California. And they have a number of facilities in Europe.
Oh, do you know where? Just curious.
Like Frankfurt, they have in Munich,
Not Germany.
a lot of Germany, also in Italy. So I've gone to visit facilities in Europe, and very clean facilities. And like I mentioned, typically the facility output is the RDF, and then I've been to facilities where they take in the RDF and then they burn it. So it's kind of a two-step process, yeah.
And they're working on municipal waste in those,
Yeah,
let's say,
yeah.
alien. Because isn't Sweden taking France and Italy's trash for
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Maybe.
at some point?
Well,
so they're
that's
doing
because their
something.
diversion rates in recycling have been so effective that
Sweden,
in
yes.
order to continue powering their waste-to-energy facility, they're taking the proposals to take trash from France and Italy because both of those countries don't want to do a new landfill, so they're looking for a place to take their trash. And you can do it when you can put it in a truck or a train. Over here, we're a little bit constrained by bodies of water.
In Europe, they put legislative constraints as well, where they restrict a lot of things from the landfill. On top of, like, in certain places in Germany that I went to, the tip fee was like $250 a ton. So it's very cost prohibitive to be wasteful, and you make a conscious decision of what you're really going to send to a landfill. And so with that barrier to landfilling and with the high cost of electricity, that's why, that in that environment, this type of project is more pervasive because there are these natural barriers to your traditional landfilling and just wastefulness of the U.S.
Any other questions?
So is there an encouragement to continue recycling individual families to do that, to try to, I know the high five kind of stuff, but or are you just saying put everything in the garbage and it'll be taken care of?
Once we get the project up and going, we're going to say just throw everything in there. Because, from a lot of the complaints I get is, I don't want to I hate that my garage is full of all these segregated things, and then I got to find the time to take it there, and it fills up my whole car. So we want to try to make it easier for the residents to divert or basically to manage their waste. So we're just going to make it one bin, you throw it all in, and we're going to do it in the front end. Which is, that's what really Europe is moving toward. They're getting away from having all these different bins. And, but the continental U.S. on the other hand, they're moving toward, let's get more bins.
Yeah.
But from a operational perspective, the bins are expensive, so the municipality puts up a high upfront investment, and then the operations of it is also there is a significant cost to it. So we're looking at, can we find a way to still have a market for what is taken out in a dirty MERF system? Because if there is still value that, a market for that, then that helps us immensely. Because our ultimate goal is landfill diversion. So as long as somebody can use it, why not do it that way and make it easier for the community? So that's what we are working toward, is just the ease of one bin, and we'll do the labor at the back end.
Any other questions from commissioners? Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very.
Thank you very much for
Yeah, so anytime you need anything else, just let me know. I'd be
Thank
happy
you,
to come
Dave.
back.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe I should go and look at some of these facilities you went to.
Probably should.
Any other elements in the director's report you wanted to cover, or?
No, it was primarily, I thought that bringing Kyle over was, you know, the most productive because of the interest and because Maui had gone through the process so recently. And I went over last week and I got to see it. And surprisingly, they have compost that is piling up because they do have a compost operation, and it is because of the downturn in the economy. While I've got piles of mulch at Honolulu that aren't moving anywhere, they have piles of compost that aren't moving anywhere.
Really? And do you give it away or do you sell it?
So our composting operation is really for a sewage sludge diversion operation. So we accept commercial green waste at $30 a ton, and our sewage sludge is $80 a ton. So, and it's really, we mix the green waste and the sewage sludge, and with the liquids from the fats, oils, and grease. So when they dewater the fats, oils, and grease, they use that to kind of wet down the piles.
So
we have static pile composting. So it's just windrows. They mix the green waste and the sludge, and they turn it every once in a while and keep temperature.
So you run solid waste and wastewater, so solid waste charges wastewater.
Yeah, so it's just a intra-departmental thing that, because sewer fund is self-funded. It's a separate fund than general fund. So sewer fund is wholly from sewer user fees. And whereas solid waste is partially landfill fees, partially refuse collection fees, and partially general fund. So from one of my arms, I just send money to my other arm. But it's sewage sludge and green waste mixed up. Static pile composting, and after like, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, it's compost. What's happening?
Does it get ground up before?
Oh yeah, so it gets ground up before the green waste does,
Yeah.
and then it gets mixed with the sewage sludge. And so, because there's those nutrients in there from the sewage sludge, it's really a good product to get things green.
But people don't want it, don't need it. I mean.
So
it's not
to answer your question about it, it's not free. They charge depending on the level of treatment. So if you wanted like a topsoil, so a fine, where they have to screen it a lot, I think it's something like $65 per cubic yard, which is basically what would fit in the back of a pickup truck. And the coarser ones are in order like $40-something. And so we pay to our contractor is Eco Compost. So we give them the green waste tip fee as well as the sewage sludge tip fee, and then they get the revenue, whatever revenue they get on the back end from the compost is theirs as well. And so when development on Maui was bustling, landscapers were trying to get yards in, and so they couldn't keep up with the demand for compost. But as I'm sure it is here, Maui development has basically screeched to a halt, and so all of a sudden that demand really shrunk, and so not too many households, get yards of compost.
But what about the farmers? That's not a commodity they want
It's
to
not,
add to.
they're always looking for somebody, or they meaning the Eco Compost, they're always looking for new clients because they're just not able to make inroads enough with the existing non-development community to get rid of the product.
I guess I'm surprised. I thought that would be something the farmers would want to add nutrients back into. So it would be, maybe it's more expensive.
But I think it's a cost factor. I mean, if it was free, they'd take all they could. But at like, $50 or $60 a yard, and if you got acres of fields,
Yeah, that's
I
probably
think it's
cost prohibitive.
cost prohibitive, then they don't want it. But we also do have a couple other composters that have private composters that have nothing to do with the county. But they only deal with commercial greenways. Ours, because we need to mix it with the sludge, it's all sewage derived compost.
Any other questions for the director's report, commissioners?
I have one. I'm just curious on, I'd requested, I was curious about the cost of the sort station. You said it's not available. Do you think that that's something that could be obtained? I mean, at some point, I guess you need to know about what your cost is on that. I'm just
Well,
curious.
Part of it is we have to kind of change the way we keep track of information in order to be able to pull that out. So Greg and I are talking about that. Because we're looking at, was it 800 different codes for what you're doing, and then we'll be able to...
Oh, 700.
Trying to be able to track, and so we're looking at what we can do in terms of tracking people's time. But it requires inputting different information than we currently do into our system in order to be able to extract it out without somebody having to physically go through everybody's timesheets.
Well, I guess my only point is it seems to me at some point you'd want to evaluate whether it's worthwhile continuing.
Yeah, no, that's a given.
Yeah, okay. That's my only point.
And also whether, depending on what direction we go, whether you end up having to get additional equipment.
Right.
To turn it more into something comparable to what a dirty MERF is in order to be able to extract the material. Because we are somewhat constrained by the equipment that we don't have.
Right.
Just a quick question on the Volcano Glenwood transfer stations. Request to allocate funding.
We're close to going out, I think, for a bid, Greg?
So the Volcano Glenwood transfer stations will be going out for a request for design build. So the money is secured for those two projects through bonds that were gotten. And so those projects, matter of fact, we're in the process of it's very close to going out on the street for the design build process. So those two sites will be built. We envision Volcano will be built first, Glenwood will be built after, but we're looking at procuring one contract for the same contractor to build both of those facilities.
So you think within a month you might have a design build?
Within a month, I'm hoping that we have that out on the street.
Out on the street, and then decision?
Then it'll take, I think I've been talking with Jeffrey over there and I think I told him that I would envision, actual construction hopefully sometime this winter.
And so the department has the funds
Correct.
Yeah.
in your,
It's in the bond.
We've already made a request for the funds to be allocated to these projects.
Right.
That's the only way we can actually get them out onto the street for the bids.
but the transfer of funds hasn't happened yet to?
No. Bond goes up, but that doesn't mean that you have the money. You have to have it specifically allocated. And typically, they don't allocate until your project is just about ready to go out to bid. So, you do your legwork and you get it out there and then you ask for the allocation. And our thinking was that if we had one contractor for both facilities, that we could get a better price rather than trying to do them as separate bids.
Any other questions from commissioners on the director's report? Moving on to commission member district update reports. Tom, do you have anything?
Yes, I met with Jay, District 2, as District 2, and his main comment to me would be he really wants to be kept up to date on the efforts to what we're going to do with our solid waste. And I know that's everybody's question idea, but that's so I probably make sure that he knows what you know as much as you can tell him. So, that's it.
Thanks. Sure. I've been speaking with residents in Hilo, and apparently there was an archaeological team surveying a section of land where the old mill was. So I was wondering if there was any updates on the archaeological report. They'd been there recently, maybe a couple of weeks
Well,
ago.
this is in regards to our wastewater
Yes.
treatment plant. And basically, the site that we were originally looking at turned out to have some archaeological features. And so we had to get a survey out there. And my understanding from Dora is that we're very close to being able to go ahead. We will have to do, obviously, avoid archaeology and in our design, but we're hoping to put those out to bid by the end of the year.
Oh, nothing.
Yeah, I met with Dennis yesterday, and he too is interested in the solid waste updates, but he requested that the commission consider recommending that there's a lifting of the exemption to truck the trash to West Hawaii, because apparently there's some kind of 6-inch soft trash, maybe Greg knows more about it, which the sooner it reaches that level, something about the liner. Do you know about that?
When you're constructing a landfill and you build a new cell, and because the cells have to be lined, you've basically got, for lack of a better term, a rubber liner. And you have to be very careful about the trash that you initially put in, because you have to make sure that it's what we call select waste. And that's so there isn't anything in it that will puncture the liner, because then you run into problems with your permits. You're going to run into EPA as well as DOH violations, because then you're going to have leachate going into the ground. And the purpose of the liner is to capture leachate. And then you have a system for extracting your leachate, treating it. If you've ever gone to Honolulu, you see what looks like water tanks, but those are not for water catchment. That's where they pump leachate to. And then at a certain point, the process is that they will then be able to spray leachate on one of the existing cells. And they basically try to use evaporation, because you only have about 8 inches of rain a year at Honolulu. Your Maui landfill, about 8 inches?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. Whereas, Hilo, we got 120 inches of rain. The faster, what we have is we have an existing cell that we're putting rubbish in. We need to move into the new cell. You can't move into the new cell until you have the select waste in there. And obviously, if you could get select waste from both sides of the island and put it into the cell, then you would fill that select waste layer more quickly and then be able to move your operations into the new cell. So that's what Fresh is referring to.
Right, and so, anyway, I guess he asked to agendize it. He thought it would move faster if it came here first, but, I guess it's up to the commissioners whether.
Oh, well, he needs a bill. I think he needs a bill to
Well,
send to us.
his point was he thought it would move faster if we recommended it, then the bill came instead of the bill.
Yeah, because if he introduces there, he has, under
exactly.
the
Come here.
procedure, they then have to send it to us, and then we have to look at it and send it back to them.
Right.
So it is faster if he sends it to us first.
Yeah, so that was, I don't know if we can agendize that or.
Well, as long as he sends us, if he's introducing something and he sends it to us, we'll agendize it.
Is that anything, Trina?
Yeah, so in terms of the timeline, would he be able to do that for the next commission meeting, or, how?
If he gets the bill to us quickly.
Just to add on to that, I did get a call from, to add to what you're saying,
Okay.
I did get a call from Fresh asking for us to basically provide what the costs were to the county of effectively working out of 2 areas at the landfill. Because what Bobby Jean was saying is, the cost to us basically means we've got to have extra manpower to work in 2 areas. We've got to have equipment in the new landfill and then also in the area where they've been traditionally filling, which adds cost to the county. So the quicker we can fill the select waste area, the less amount of time we spend in 2 areas. So that's what he was asking the division to give him information on, is what those costs were. Because they are direct costs to the division to operate in 2 separate areas. So.
Okay, update on efforts to procure a waste-to-energy facility.
Well, that update is primarily bringing Mr. Ginoza here because, you know, before we launch anything, from my perspective is that you have to do a little bit of research. And for me, kind of the low-hanging fruit is the fact that Maui's just gone through the process. And so it made sense to me to reach out to Maui and find out about their process and what they did. And he very kindly put a whole bunch of his documents in Word for me and put it on a little diskette so Sharon has it. So that will probably save me and Sharon a lot of typing. Plagiarize like crazy.
Good. Recycle.
Yeah.
Just one other question. What is Hawaii considering this method also? They are.
Well, they're considering something because they're, I think, in worse shape than you guys as far as the landfill.
They have one.
Oh, right.
And they're running out of space.
Yeah.
So I actually was supposed to go a couple weeks ago, because I met with them as well. And they're very interested, and so I gave them all my files too. No sense reinvent the wheel.
Right, absolutely.
Maui taxpayers paid for it, so you can thank your Maui friend. But yeah, so they are considering it, and so we have it's either once a month or no, every other month, the directors have a teleconference. So, and we kind of update each other on things.
It's interesting that you're at this stage and you don't have the pressure of the landfill and Hawaii and we do. It's very interesting.
For me, it was more a matter of, we spend so much on our diversion programs without looking at something that could be such a, really a comprehensive diversion program. So why continue to battle all these programs, implement these programs that if you can get something that could be more efficient and more economical. So that was my motivation. Because like I treat my department like my own money. I'm kind of stingy. So so that was my the impetus for me was it was a good situation that we didn't have to be so desperate. And so we get kind of the best of them come out, versus if they sense that, if they sense blood in the water, then it's like, well, let's get them.
I might mention that one of the disincentives the last time we went out for an RFP was the fact that there wasn't really blood in the water. Because yes, we need to do something about the Hilo landfill, but we have another landfill. So there was a real concern on prospective vendors that, how serious are you about committing to something if you already have a landfill that you can go to? So, are you seriously just looking at the Hilo trash? And so that was a disincentive for people to come and make proposals the last time because of the concern that we would look at it and say, hey, it's too expensive, we're not going to enter into a contract. The other concern was that when we went through this before, we were looking at, basically, we would finance, we wanted to be the owner, but we were going to do a design, build, operate contract, but we would own it. And there were others that said, no, we want to own it. You know, so we're not going to submit a proposal if the county owns the facility. So you have different corporations have different goals when they're evaluating a project. And so depending on how you set up your proposal, you will get certain people that are interested and others that you might have wanted to come and submit a proposal and they'll say, no, those parameters aren't the one we're going to work with. The other thing is that sometimes if you only have X amount of development dollars and you're a corporation, they also look at bang for their buck. And so I think at the same time we were looking, I think it was Puerto Rico was going out there. Puerto Rico had significantly more tonnage, so the revenue stream was significantly higher. So there were some people saying, you know, do I make an offer for a proposal in the middle of the Pacific that only has 200 tons a day, or do I go after something that's going to be doing 1,000 tons a day? If I only have X amount of money to do in putting a proposal together. And so there's some of that. So I was greatly, intrigued and happy to hear that Kyle had as many vendors interested because it made me think that the market has changed a little bit in the last 6 years so that there may be more interest than we had 6 years ago. Or actually more like 8. It's 2005 when we were really doing this.
Thank you. New business. Sorry, the update on the billing efforts, water supply billing efforts.
Still looking at next year because we have software issues to work out, but we do have their agreement to do so, and so it's just a matter of integrating the software and putting that into place. But we are moving ahead on that, and then I think one thing I possibly, I'm not sure if I told you, we are moving office.
Right, to the...
in the new facility. September 20th is when we're projected to move over. So if you're looking for us, we will be downstairs from water supply off of Cape Honolulu.
Moving on to new business, referral resolution 123-13. Draft 2 for comments and recommendations. Comments and recommendations.
I'm sorry, I need to go.
Okay,
Anytime
But you got the big essentials there.
Let me know.
Thank you.
I'm happy to help you guys out.
I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for the CD. Sharon thanks you. Well, really, this is for you folks to make comments or recommendations to the council on this resolution. I'm not convinced that we necessarily need to do an RFI or an RFQ. What I would be interested is basically trying to reach out to the various vendors that responded to Maui's solicitation. And at the moment, we're still basically trying to get research, and I might direct you, there's a very recent guidebook that's been put out through Columbia University. I'll send you the link to it. It's been put out as a guidebook to Latin American countries that are in the process of trying to convert from landfills to alternative, either waste to energy, gasification, anaerobic digestion projects, and it outlines some of the possibilities as well as some of the constraints and his recommendations. And very recent, the release for distribution was July 25th. 2013, so it's a very recent guidebook, and it addresses a lot of the types of questions that people have about waste to energy and what directions to go. And it also has sections on it that refer to the experience of certain islands in the Bahamas Puerto Rico and what their experience was in dealing with their landfills and waste to energy issues. But after, talking to Kyle, it seems that I don't know that I would want to lock into anything that limited options. Because it certainly seems like Maui County's experience is trying to evaluate what the cost of other programs are. We don't have the same type of composting operation here because we don't have the same issues. So I would just caution that anything in the resolution that tries to, and well, obviously it's a resolution. It's, it's not binding, but I think that as far as I'm concerned, we're going to be doing research and then we'll see whether we go forward with an RFP. And I am currently exploring all solid waste technologies and reaching out to others.
Sharon, do we have a deadline?
I don't know how you want to deal
Yes,
with
we
this.
have to respond by September the 9th. And if we don't, then they take it as a negative recommendation. That's what
I have some comments.
Okay.
Looking at this, it seems to me an example of what's wrong with this process. 4 years ago, the island adopted a integrated solid waste management plan. In the meantime, part of that has been rejected, some of the recommendations. Other information has matured. It may be a time to do a reanalysis of parts of it. And this presentation from Maui is sort of another example of why a structured, logical, informed process should be followed, and a resolution that just picks two solutions. I don't understand the motivation behind it. And I just think it's wrong to start recommending conclusions without a process. And I know that some of the issues that we're addressing sound like sort of apple pie issues where, waste to energy must be good because it's something bad becomes something good. Or tube-in recycling, as we learned, is definitely good. Well, maybe not in some circumstances. But there has to be a process to look at these things and not just...
If you look at the title, okay, if it didn't have the words emphasizes composting, mulching, and increased personal responsibility, if it just said urging the administration to adopt an approach to the county's solid waste program that considers all solid waste technologies that best contribute to the reduction and handling of solid waste in a manner that is environmentally sound and cost effective. I don't have a problem with that.
But why do we need to be told that?
But I know, but I'm just saying, but it doesn't select something out. And one of the reasons I brought up composting with Kyle is I was stunned when I went to Maui and saw the piles of compost, because Maui traditionally had been held up to us as this great example of entering into a composting production with a good product that was in high demand. Well, the high demand was when development, it wasn't farmers that were going after the compost. It was people doing subdivisions, it was people doing the landscaping for hotels. It was a much more, it was not an agricultural, because the price, in order to run your operation and run it at a price that makes sense, it wasn't available to the farmers. Not at that kind of, where $50 a truckload, $65 a truckload. And so when I saw just piles and piles of compost, and they were saying that right now, they can't sell it. So you don't want to lock yourself into something, and say that you're not free to explore everything else, because you can see what they're doing on Maui is they're looking at two steps, Basically, you're going to end up with a fuel off of the anaerobic digestion, and what they were hoping to do is pull out, that a high percentage of our waste stream is food waste. So you pull the food waste out, and you put that into the anaerobic digestion. And then you have the other one where you're trying to do the RDF, but you also, their hiccup there is the contractor has to have an end user for the RDF. And despite having gone through the RFQ, RFI, and RFP, the person they've selected still doesn't have a contract yet to sell the RDF. So if they can't get that contract, then you're not going to have this happen on Maui. Because they're not going to put their money in if they can't sell the RDF. If they can't sell the RDF until they enter into a contract. So it's so much more complicated sometimes than just saying, oh, reduce, reuse, recycle. And you have to look at everything. So to me, it's a general, reso that says look at everything. Don't just select one. That's fine. But one that selects particular end products when you're not even sure if you've got a market for it, God, I've got a little bit of a problem. And I was surprised when I went to Maui and discovered that they currently don't have much of a market for their compost. And it's good quality compost.
Actually, that's surprising to me too. Because, I like the idea of composting. And I was curious, if you have any ballpark estimate, if we were to pursue the composting, and I guess you're going to give us some more information. I hadn't read this yet. I'm just curious, you don't want to, spend a lot of money if it's not going to be, useful in the long run. I was just surprised that there wasn't a market for it, I guess. Maybe it's just too expensive.
The Oahu plant at Waialua, I think, was $40 million.
For the compost?
For the plant.
Composting facility.
And so, if you're going to put that kind of money in, you need to price your product at a price that pays off your facility. Either you have to charge the county enough money to pay for the $40 million investment, or you've got to charge the end user. And so, to me, the problem that I have with the resolution is basically I don't think that we should be told
what the answer is
in the resolution.
Any other comments?
Could I move my recommendation?
Well, no, I'd like to discuss it a little bit more. I would like to know if we could, perhaps, respond without saying totally don't like it, with saying, like what you suggested, or maybe a modification of it, a rewording or something that would still give the push. Because I think we, personally, I'd like, we have a big problem, and we need to figure out what the right answer is, and it takes a lot smarter people than me to do that. But I don't think that it's totally wrong, but I agree with, being locked into, I guess my bottom line is that I would like to say, modify it a bit so that we could be acceptable to the, to the commission and to the department, whatever that would require.
So it would be, your suggestion is no, and then say it nicely.
Well, I think, like BJ said, we don't want to be locked in, or I don't think the department needs to be locked into.
Right. So,
but she had an idea. It would be acceptable to you if some of the words were removed, right, BJ?
Just in the title.
Yeah.
But
General
the
idea.
problem I have with a lot of other stuff in here is that it makes assumptions about stuff without any facts to back it up. It's like, you go down the page and it says, increasing the availability of on-island compost will reduce the cost currently paid by farmers to obtain compost from mainland sources. Number one, I don't know how many farmers are paying for compost from the mainland. I don't know what price they're paying. And I don't know whether it would be cheaper or more expensive for on-island compost. Because, you know, when I go in Maui, who has an operation, and we're saying farmers aren't buying it.
Farmers aren't buying it from Maui.
See, that was a real revelation.
And it's not going anywhere and it's piling up. Then, so I question, is that a valid statement? You know, I don't know that you need the next one, composting specific heat region. You know, we've been fairly successful with I haven't heard incidents of our mulch having fire ants because the heat, the mulch produces heat too. And we've been able to manage that. So I don't know that composting is necessarily needed to prevent this, you know, the spread of those species, or whether you can just do it through your current operation. So I'm just saying that there are all these assumptions in the reso, and I don't know where the information to back up those assumptions comes from.
And there are just a variety of factors. So we can have a motion, which I think, you know, we need to decide now.
If I may interject, I think
Yes.
we need to move this along because you have on your agenda 11 o'clock
Okay.
for the site visit.
So do we have a
I
motion?
move that there be no motion, no support of this resolution.
Do we have a second? All in favor? All opposed? You're in favor. Motion approved.
Wait a minute, you need to,
Yeah, ask for
We gotta
discussion.
take the vote.
yeah, I think you need to do a roll call so they know who has voted.
Okay, so I just
Oh, I'm
have.
sorry, I thought you said.
I don't know, could you count? Because I couldn't.
No, I couldn't, that's what I was gonna ask for.
That's the
was it,
problem,
can we
you couldn't
get a
tell who was
voice
voting
vote?
yes, do it.
Okay, I just wanted to, you know, I disagree. Is there some way to express that you're in favor of the spirit of the resolution, but not the particulars? I mean, or do you have to just vote it down?
It depends on how your motion is stated. So
Yeah, my motion would be that there be no recommendation for or against. No action.
Okay. So I'll, yeah.
Is that the same motion you made before, or did you change it?
That was my intent, maybe I didn't say it well, but then
Yeah.
I move that there be
Let's see.
no recommendation.
Okay, could you withdraw your first motion and this will be your,
Just clarify by saying no recommendation, positive or negative.
okay. Okay, so now you can take the vote. And you have to know who's voting yes and who's voting no so she can get it in the minutes.
So, all in favor? Well, we need a second.
We already had this.
I'm going to do it again.
Yeah, he said he seconded it.
Okay, thank you. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Did you get all that? I'm in favor.
Okay.
I've got this.
Okay.
Now, can I have a clarification? The first motion that Sherm had was a motion and no support of this resolution. And Bruce seconded. We withdrew that, right?
Right.
Then the second motion was that we make no recommendation on this resolution for or against, or positive or negative. You said both ways. Okay, so is that the one that stands?
Correct.
And Bruce seconded that.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we voted. And all opposed? Motion approved. So, discussion of decision-making process and timeline on reevaluation of county solid waste. I think, programs and direction. I think many of the discussions we've had this morning really do cover that, unless you have things, to add, BJ.
No, I'm continuing to do, research, both by talking and with the other directors and seen the progress of their various programs. And also by, I've had a stream of people calling me about their technologies and their proposals, as well as trying to continue doing research of, what the current status of different technologies are, what other municipalities are doing, so that I can have a better handle on the progress that's been made, or the lack of progress that's been made in different emerging technologies. And for me, I'm basically looking at, do you have a plant? Is it dealing with municipal solid waste?
We had a site scheduled visit for 11.
Yeah,
Sharon,
I told them
we're running late.
that we're running late, and I would have called when we left here.
okay, because we have a presentation on composting process.
Basically, that's the handout. I thought that that was the easiest. And also, I, as a compliment to that, is I wanted to have Kyle talk about the process that they have and the current difficulties that they're having finding people to buy the compost.
Yeah, but maybe, defer any discussion to the next meeting. Is if we have questions,
We can defer it to the next meeting, we can.
yeah, so we can go on with the presentation.
Yeah.
So future agenda items, we have sewer connection waiver exemption policy update to include expected date of implementation and sunshine law presentation coming up. And there are other future agenda items. Sharon and I were working on the agenda for the next meeting.
I'm actually going to ask Amy if she can do the sunshine law presentation, because she's got it in PowerPoint and she's done it for multiple commissions already.
Okay, so whenever you have availability.
We can do it next
meeting.
month. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll put that on the agenda for next month. And our next meeting is September 25th in Kona, and we have our Hilo wastewater treatment plant site visit. The public is invited, closed-toed shoes. Hope everyone has closed-toed shoes.
I have my steel toes in.
We have steel toes. Motion to adjourn.
I move, so moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion